in-depth discussion about special education because it's so much involved in it. But what we came up with were three, we tried to narrow it down to three broad groups. And the first was training and education on the local level, which means that parents need to be trained on special education, what their rights are, what they're entitled to, how to go to IEP meetings, things of that nature. The second thing we discussed was developing the community lawyering model, which is kind of what I do now, but the different segments are kind of in place, we just haven't brought it together. And so the idea is to find other attorneys who are actually interested in doing the community lawyering and working with advocates in the community and making better outcomes. And that includes helping parents with due process hearings, helping parents in IEP meetings, maybe appealing cases to the Chancery Court or what have you, whatever is necessary in terms of filling that gap and putting some more, I guess, teeth or strength behind the efforts that the parents and advocates are trying to make in the community. And then the third biggest category was accountability, which encompasses a lot, which in addition to possibly getting on the Special Ed Advisory Council in Jackson or taking applications. Now, one of us needs to be on that council. And us understanding the hierarchy in terms of accountability. What does the state require to do a report to the federal government in terms of receiving those funds? What is the Mississippi State Department's accountability in terms of what they do with the school districts? If the school district is not complying, what are they responsible for doing? And once we understand what they're responsible for doing, then we will be better able to hold them accountable. All right, next is the collaboration strategy. One of the things we discussed in terms of our strategy is getting out the word in terms of collecting what we said, wins or successful stories, so that parents and students and the community understand that there are successes, that you can file a due process hearing and actually force the school district to give your child the services they need. You can appeal a school board's decision and get your child back in school once they've been kicked out. There are some success stories out there, and a lot of people don't know about them. We thought that would be a great tool in terms of engaging the community and getting them on board with what we're doing. Identifying our resources. Because, you know, up here we were talking about training. There's so many agencies out there right now who are responsible for training parents. And so it's important that we identify all of these different other organizations that are already doing the work and pull them into our collaboration and working with them to increase our capacity and increase the resources to the community.
And let me say one other thing is you lifted up a really interesting model, what your mom is doing. She's a special education, past special education teacher, and using that as a resource. Just tell them a little bit about what she's doing.
Yeah, just resources, I guess, that we haven't even thought of. My mother is a retired educator, 30+ years, and she worked for the State Department of Education for years, was very disenchanted with what was going on there. She, according to her, there are a lot of people that collect the checks that literally would sit in their office and read books during the day, absolutely doing nothing. She hated it. And that's kind of how she came to the Delta. I called her and I said, well, Mom, you're not happy to find a job. You know, you got a master's degree and stuff. So she actually applied and ended up coming to Greenville because she worked for the Sped Department of the Greenville Public School District and lived with me for some time. She retired about 1.5 years ago, and she knows everything about Sped law. And so when I first came on board, and during my own training trying to learn Sped education, when I went to these IEP meetings, I understood and knew I didn't know everything I needed to know. I felt very at a disadvantage, and so I started bringing her along. And she's now an advocate in the Delta for parents in Sped meetings, and I send her to the meetings on her own. And I'm more of a mediator. I try and work with the district. It's on the good cop, and she's the bad cop, because she's been like, you're supposed to be doing this. And I'm like, you can always tell these folks how to do their job. But she has been a really good advocate in the community. It's really given her something to do, so it's a plus for her too. And in addition to that, we make a great team. And so those are some other people. And there's another teacher who just retired who's also calling, who wants to do it as well. And so that's just awesome. You get people who can do that. Because one of the issues that I ran into in terms of the community lawyering is we train these attorneys, but one training session really is not enough for them to understand how Sped law works. So if we can partner them with someone like my mom or a lay advocate or someone who understands the ins and outs of idea, then together he can learn from her and they can work together. She can help guide the attorney, and that's the whole idea of making sure we have people in place who actually are want to be a part of what it is we're doing. Okay, the proposed outcomes. The whole point of all this is, first of all, is to provide, hopefully in the end, some professional development to our superintendents and teachers and stuff. A problem with SPED that we found is, a lot of our superintendents don't get it. You go into these SPED meetings and they're sitting there, and I realize, well, some of the SPED directors don't understand it either, but, okay. And then, one big issue that I've had, and apparently it's across the board, is teachers just don't get it. Teachers a lot of times say, he's just a bad child, y'all just want an excuse, so he won't have to be kicked out of my class. And it's some sensitivity training to some extent, and helping them understand what, they don't see a child bleeding or a Band-Aid, and maybe they don't see the hurt, but a child with emotional disability, for instance, that's a legitimate disability, and that really explains why the child is acting out, but a lot of times teachers don't want to accept that, they just want to push them out. And so we're hoping to partner with agencies like One Voice, who's kind of doing some of that already, and getting the superintendents on board, which I understand at this point is part of the issue, so that they will open up, because without the superintendents, I don't think they'll come in and train the teachers anyway. And then, we want to put a representative on the advisory council. That's one of our outcomes. We already discussed that. And then development, we want to develop the actual community lawyering model. We discussed that. And another issue we talked about was JPS, what's going on right here in terms of the accountability, the plan that they have in place. So the whole point is to get a copy of the plan, see what's supposed to be happening, and explain to the parents why accreditation is at issue, and why, and what the plan is, and what that means, and what the school district is supposed to be doing. Again, it's kind of all falls into training.
Yeah, it's the tangible thing that we can do right now.
Right.
We can start moving.
Because that's happening as we speak, and I think they have until November 1, is that what it is? Right. So that's fast approaching. And then training our lay advocates. Well, no, I guess all this is one of the other action plans is that Cper money is out there now, and we were thinking that this might be a great opportunity for us as a group to get together and decide what collaboration plans we want, so we could apply for that money and hopefully use that to help push our projects forward. Develop a listserv so that everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and kind of make sure we all stay on the same page and understand what the issues are. And
understanding special legislation and passage.
yes, so there's a lot of law that has just passed in relation to special education issues. A lot of people still know this dyslexia, and I don't completely understand that, but dyslexia, and what parents now know, what we've been doing is taping these meetings now, which has become really critical in terms of what we do now. They have a right to take meetings, special ed meetings, but staying on top of how this SPED law is developing and making sure that we know so that we can put the word out to our parents. In our timeline, we already have some dates, the 25th, 26th, and the 27th, and everybody's going to check their calendars, and we're going to agree when our next meeting is, in hopes that, number one, we can get back together and hash this discussion out a little more, and also possibly get together so that we can meet the July 15th deadline for the
One last thing, when we talked about training of the lay advocates, was we hope the MCJ could play a really major role in would be around the due process hearings for lay advocates. And we really talked about how can they come into play, because like Ellen said, you don't have to be an attorney to do due process hearings. So, but we know that there's new territory, and like she said, it's really technical. So how can we partner with MCJ to come up and have those different types of training so that lay advocates could go in and do their leg work? But also, like she said, she has lawyers that would want to help out, but she didn't feel comfortable with letting them loose and practicing on parents. So, how could we, bring that training into place?
That's a great point, because the lawyers have the basic skills to do a due process similar to a trial, whereas the lay advocate has the knowledge that they need in order to make the trial. So I think together that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Another thing about this due process hearing that's happening is this whole Jim Keith era. So a lot of these times with these school districts, when due process come up, you walk in there and you're dealing with these attorneys, and that's all they do. And so that's intimidating for a lawyer like me, and I just can only imagine in terms of a lay advocate, but I think together we could definitely slay that drag.
Absolutely.
So one of the other things I think we probably need to consider for those of us that are on school boards, that have school board attorneys that do due process hearing, this is a good way we can engage them as part of the community lawyering process.
I also think that you should include those behavioral centers in your communities, because a lot of them are also complaining of, you're getting students who are being referred to them that should be referred other places. So the behavioral centers should also be a key player in these,
Who are behavior centers?
like Brentwood Behavior. A lot of your students that come from the Mississippi Delta get sent to Brentwood Behavioral Center, which is here off of Lakewood. And it's a mental institution for youth and adults. And they don't do what is needed around their education at that center. I work there for
You mean when the child is there, they're not receiving their
They're
lesson
not
from
receiving
school?
their special education stuff from their school. So
Right,
you need to
there's
make sure
some-
once the child goes to those centers, that these special educators are going with them, or making sure that their work is getting to them once they're at their centers. And making sure that the educators that are at those centers are educators.
I would push back though, because the reality is our children go to Brentwood for 2 weeks. You can't go you can't be institutionalized, I know, for 2 weeks and come out with,
You have some
What's
students
going
who
on?
are there for 4 months.
okay, if it's a longer term, but
It's a
children
long
should be
term.
institutionalized for 4 months. We also have to push back on this whole notion of
Of
institutionalizing our
Right.
children. We need to be pushing for
Right.
community-based
And there
alternatives.
is, Ellen, we can talk about this, but
Right.
you know, the Olmstead Act, there is
That's right.
a finding by the DOJ, and Kimberly Duffy, who's the education attorney on the coast, is all knee deep in that, and so
That's
that
right.
we may have to drag her in and try
I
to.
just want to make sure that they are part of this conversation, because that is a huge problem, that our students are getting sent there and they shouldn't be. So.
Yeah.
And
But
the
I
lack
think
of resources in our
the
local
lack of
communities.
resources.
Right.
Myself is not it.
Correct.
So that is something there's a lot of stuff to
It's a
discuss,
lot
I
of
didn't bring
stuff.
that, but that's part of the problem.
We
These
have-
are especially people who are not receiving any
Their
type of
services.
services.
Right.
But I think also in that process too, when we're actually talking about the training and coming in, understanding exactly what the law is, those youth court referees needs to be in there as well, because they need to understand that just because something is happening at the school, that may not be a reason for you to send a child to
Right.
youth court. And then they are there in those
We're
facilities
actually
and
working
we,
with MCJ now, not MCJ, I am MCJ. We're actually with MC Law School, they provide the training to the youth court referees and the judges, and they're gonna add a component to their next training about SPED and what judges need to know and what they need to know. in terms
See,
of
this is the piece when we talk about lawyers and communities being together. There is already a law that says when an attorney represents a child on more than 2 instances in the youth court, they should have gone through this training already. That law passed with
There has
the,
been no training on SPED
right.
in
And
youth court at
again,
this point.
you know, we litigate, we get good stuff, but if communities aren't a part of that, it's hanging up here someplace, but it never gets implemented because it has to be pushed up and it has to be pushed down. Because there are already laws on the books that say attorneys must have 6 hours of training if you're in the youth court process. We could even, as lay advocates, become guardian ad litems. You know, which is a way to protect a child when you have a situation where the family, you have a teenager who, these are my needs as my teenager, but the parent is saying, no, I want my child locked up. That child has a right to what's called a guardian ad litem to say, you are expressly there to look at my needs and interests, even if a child and a parent has a, disagreement. So there are lots of stuff out there that's already in place, but because we have this separation, it's not getting done. So maybe that's the other thing that we can look at. What's the good stuff out there that's already on the books? We don't want to reinvent a wheel.
Right.
So, like I said, we got some work to do. This whole community lawyering, I think, is a powerful tool, but we really all have to be sitting at the table and respect the strengths and weaknesses that we bring to that process.